for tuning in. Most of you, I imagine, who are online right now will know what this is about. But for those of you who have no connection to Solent University in Southampton, this is a very special edition of a live stream. So we're doing a live Q&A. So this is a collaboration between myself and Solent University, the musical theatre and acting and performance department. So we're collaborating together with the students who are based evidently all over the place. So hi, Amelia from Spain as well. Wow. So we're collaborating together to create a community project whereby I will help in any way I can the students to create some short 2 to 4 minute videos, which will then be sent to primary school children in the area. Hello, my brother has just tuned in all the way from New Zealand. Hi, Dave. We'll speak next weekend. So the idea is that we will create some short 2 to 4 minute videos of a story that already exists. So it might be a book, it might be something else, and we will distill that into a short video using kind of characterization, kind of props, physicality, all of those elements that we can use and take from a book into an audio and visual kind of project. And these videos will be sent to primary school children around the Southampton area, and I assume maybe a bit further afield as well. So tonight is a live Q&A with the students, so I can answer any questions that they may have on how to structure a story or how to kind of distill some of the kind of elements and best bits from a 200, 300 page book into such a short video. So I hope some of the students, you have questions. If you do have questions, please just type them in the comment section, and I will do my very best to answer them. If you have any specific questions around the kind of format or how you're going to produce these films, please do ask those questions. But I think Sarah Mepham, who I have had the fortune of meeting online over the last 6 weeks due to another creative writing course I've recently held, she will be able to answer those questions. But in terms of content and in terms of using the best bits from a pretty long story from a book and distilling that down into a short video, please do fire away. And I will be delighted as well to assist you in any way I can throughout the project. I personally do a lot of work with young people, both in primary schools and secondary schools, through employability workshops, career insight days, and so forth. So I'd be delighted to help in any way I can. So first question we have, there's a few questions now coming in. Fantastic. So this is a question from Sarah. Do you have any tips of how to bring the characters alive through words? So, there's a number of ways we can do this. So I think through words, we can help really shine a light on what makes a character by either the dialogue, the words they say, but also how they say those words. And so I guess in a video medium, you can really, I guess, exaggerate and amplify those individual character traits even more so. And I guess if you've got kind of 2 to 4 minute videos, then you really want to kind of bring those elements to the fore. So I think through words, you can definitely pick out all of those individual, unique character traits from characters in the story that you're going to kind of document, and really bring those to the fore. So maybe they have a certain way of expressing themselves. Maybe they have a certain mannerisms, or whether they have they may shout all of the time when they talk. They may have a particular accent. They may have a speech impediment. Whatever it is which makes that character unique, I guess you want to kind of pick those out of the story and really shine a light on them when making your video. I hope that answers some of the question. But Sarah, please feel free to kind of come back to me in the comment section and I will respond accordingly. Next question from Dakota. Great name, by the way, Dakota. Fantastic name. What's the best way to use your imagination when creating stories? So I think what's the best way to use your imagination? I think one of the good things to do is to get to a place where your mind is free almost. So you're kind of free from distraction. You are, I guess, a bit warmed up in that you're not gonna get to that place immediately, although you may have a moment of inspiration when you're in the supermarket, for example. But I think, if you want to get to a place where your imagination is flowing, I think some of the activities I've run recently with younger children is just around kind of creating characters on the spot. So thinking, for example, look around you in wherever you are right now, look around you, find an object. So it could be a glass, a cup, a pen, a kettle, and then make a character, give that object a name and create a character from that object. And this is just a kind of warm up. This is just to get your mind kind of flowing, get your brain whirring, just to start to unlock your imagination. So I think using your imagination when we're creating anything, whether that's a story, whether that's a piece of music, whether that's a painting, whatever it is, I think, we need to be free. We need to have some element where we kind of remove ourselves from the chaos and the world around us, and we kind of just get into a place where, we can explore our minds. I don't know if that sounds a bit airy-fairy. Apologies if it does. Another kind of tip on that, and this is kind of the opposite of what I've just said, is, but when we're in those kind of mundane environments, when we're kind of, I guess, at the bus stop, or we're in the doctor's surgery waiting for our GP appointment, or we're kind of in the supermarket, wherever it may be, quite often, a lot of us will kind of look on our smartphones and we'll check our emails, or we may look at Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is. And actually we're blocking out the world around us, when in fact, in those situations, this is where we can take inspiration, where we can just notice, some of the little quirks of the people around us, the general public, society. And again, this can be the start of coming up with new ideas and creating characters around that. So the first part of the answer to that question from Dakota was about kind of when you're in that moment, writing at home, or making music at home, whatever it is, we want to kind of block out the world. The second part of the answer is kind of the opposite. So it's when we're outside in the world, we're in those mundane daily situations, we kind of want to observe and just listen and watch the world around us, because there's so much interesting stuff that happens just without us even noticing. So I guess there's two parts to that answer. Dakota, I hope that answered the question, but if it hasn't, please come back. So next question is from Francesca. How do you critique the stories you have written to further develop them? So very good question. So I would say I've wrote 2 books so far, children's books. CEO, I always get this because I'm looking at myself in the camera, I get them mixed up. So this is CEO, Child Executive Officer, and that's Odd Socks. And my third one will be out very shortly. And with both of those and my next book, which I'm writing now, I often get to a point where I need to take a step back so I can, I guess, critique it with a bit of a fresh mind. So it's quite easy when we're creating something to become so immersed in it, so involved, that it's quite hard to kind of have a bit of impartial kind of judgment on it. We're so involved in it. It's part of us. And so it's very difficult to kind of look in the mirror, so to speak. So a piece of advice would be to kind of take a step back, have a break, whether that's a day, 2 days, a week, and kind of forget about it, kind of just live your life, do other things, and then you can come back to it. Another tip is also to ask people to read it or consume it, whatever the piece of art is. So, you can ask your family and friends and loved ones, but they'll probably give you, an answer that you want, that they'll be kind, they'll be supportive. But actually, if you can test it out on, ideally the target audience that you intend to kind of use your piece of art with, then that would be better, especially if it's children. And children can be brutally honest, but in this instance, we kind of need that candor and honesty in order to kind of critique our own work. So number one is to kind of take a step back, have a bit of a break, then come back to it and just look at it with a bit of a fresh pair of eyes. And then step two is to, maybe give it to, test it out with some people who fit that demographic of your target audience. I hope that answers your question, Francesca. If it doesn't, please reply back. Next question, and I'm really sorry, but I'm going to struggle to pronounce your name. Apologies. Is it Anya? If it isn't, apologies, and please correct me in the comment section. But what kind of stories would you suggest using? So I guess for the purposes of your project, then if the target audience is primary school children, then we would want to use maybe a story that is familiar. Primary school children is a very broad spectrum of people, and within that, you can have children with special educational needs, for example, and that would then need to be maybe slightly more bespoke and tailored. But as a starting point, to rework something that's vaguely familiar would be good. If this is to be a series of short videos, then maybe the idea is that that one of them is something that is very familiar, something that is very popular with primary school children right now or over the last few years. And then we can maybe introduce, for one of the other videos, something which is less popular or is not even known. Maybe introduce a story from the past, from when we were children, and kind of retell that in kind of modern times. So I guess we want a story which we can realistically and practically condense and distill down into a 2-minute or 4-minute video. So if we're thinking of War and Peace, that's probably not going to cut it, but we want something which is going to inform and educate, but also be entertaining for the children. So I hope, Anya, if that answers your question. Apologies if it doesn't. Again, any of these questions, if I don't answer them to your satisfaction, please just write in the comments section and I will come back to it. Don't be shy. Fantastic. So next question from William. When you have your basic structure, i.e. 4 parts of the story, how then do you cut a 30-page story down to a 2 to 4 minute time frame? And what would be your process? So there's something a great question, by the way. So I've recently ran a creative writing course for children. It was a 6-week course live on Facebook every Wednesday. It's just finished. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And one of the workshops on that was around plot. And in that workshop, you can view it on YouTube if you want to. I talked about the 7 milestones that often occur in most stories. I can't name them off the top of my head right now. I would need to kind of look in my notes, which I'm not going to, because it would distract me. But, you know, there's 7 common milestones, events which occur in most stories, and especially in most children's stories. So, you know, you've got an introduction at the beginning where you introduce the lead character and some of the main characters around the lead character. You also introduce the environment, the setting in which the story is to be set. But you also introduce a sense of normality. You know, what is normal life like for our characters? Because we want to give the reader, or the viewer in this instance, a sense of normality, because then when something happens which changes that normality, the reader or the viewer has that sense of contrast. So, you know, the 7 milestones: introduction, then there's an event, an incident which changes everything, and then there's another several more milestones which occur leading up to the finale. So I can go more into that if you want to on a separate session, but you can watch that video on YouTube or on my Facebook page. It's called Plot, and I think it was workshop number 3. But if you can distill those 7 milestones into 2 to 4 minutes, then, you know, that is a good starting point. So it's kind of like, for any football fans out there, and apologies to use a football analogy, but it's kind of like match of the day. That's what you're aiming for. You're aiming to take a kind of 200-page, 250-page story and then kind of distill it into a very short medium. And so you want to take the highlights, but enough of the highlights which provide sufficient context. So it's I guess it's trying to achieve a balance, and that's probably not an easy thing to do, but I'd love to help in any way I can. Fantastic. William, hope that answered your question. Please come back to me. Catherine, thank you for your question. I've created a story. Is there a specific tense, example first or third person, that would work better in order to bring the story to life and become more understandable for children? It's a very good question. So I think it depends how old the children are, because believe it or not, you know, if you look at children's books generally, you know, there's a number of different kind of subsections of demographics within that. There's kind of, you know, the kind of picture books, which I assume is not what you're writing, but then you've got kind of middle readers. So that's kind of where my books are aimed at, kind of, you know, 7 to 10-ish. The lines are quite blurred on the exact age ranges. But then you've got kind of young adults where, you know, you've got stories which have some adult themes, but are still for kind of teenagers as such. And so I guess in my demographic, you know, for kind of 7 to 10, 11-year-olds, most of these books, most books out there for this demographic are written in third person. You know, they're written from the author's perspective, from a perspective whereby, you know, the author isn't involved in the narrative at all, but can see everything which goes on. So they're kind of completely separated from the narrative and anything that happens within the story, and they have full kind of a bird's eye view over everything which is going on. But, you know, that's not to say to not write it in first person. And I guess, you know, if you prefer to write in first person, then you should do that. And what I've always said to anyone I speak to about creative writing is to do it just for fun, first and foremost. You know, do it to enjoy yourself, do it for your personal pleasure. And if you do that, then you will do it more and you will get better. And so whatever you prefer, but the most common is kind of third person. I hope that helps, Catherine. Question from Olivia. What's your starting point when wanting to write a story? So good question. I think there's not one specific answer. I guess from my perspective, it's generally some kind of idea. And I know that sounds like very vague, but I guess, some concept which I can then kind of quickly build around that. And then, one idea springs new ideas, and then you kind of build from there. Some authors, I've read interviews and watched kind of YouTube videos of various authors, and some authors will start with a character and then build a narrative and a setting around a particular character. Others will just have an idea and then start from there. I think the important thing is to, whenever you have an idea, is to write it down. I've repeated this mantra over the last few weeks on the creative writing course, is to, always write your ideas down. Our brains are these incredible organisms which are constantly whirring and buzzing, and kind of new thoughts pop in and out, and you can have an idea and then 2 seconds later it's gone. And so I often have either a pen and paper with me, most places I am or where I go to, but I also take a lot of notes on my phone in draft emails. And once that's down, it's all about transferring ideas from here down onto to paper or somewhere, and then you can always build on them from there. And sometimes an idea that you may have now, you may not use it for months or even years, and then all of a sudden something may click. But I guess the important thing is, if you want to kind of write stories, is to kind of build up this portfolio, this archive of ideas. And so you've always got it there, and you can always kind of work from them in the future. That doesn't really answer your question, Olivia. Apologies. I guess in terms of a starting point, there is no definitive answer. It's just you have this idea and then you build it from there, or you're inspired to create a character and you work from there. Some authors kind of decide on an ending and then work backwards. I guess if you do have something which you would like to write about, then just kind of build it from there, and don't worry about following a certain structure or doing things a certain way. Just do it the way you want to. Rhiannon, thank you for your question. Do you have ideas about wow endings? So, I think ending a story is probably, in my opinion and my experience, is probably, one of the hardest things to do about writing a story, because you want to leave the reader or the viewer satisfied, and you want to kind of tie everything nicely together. You want to answer at least most of the questions that the reader or the viewer has, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too formulaic. You don't want it to be too obvious. You want to have something in there which is a surprise. So again, not an easy thing to do. If your story is a one-off story, i.e. it's not meant to be part of a sequel, then you can really try and tie everything together in a nice bundle, answer those questions that the reader may have. But actually, if you think, you get halfway through your story and you think, wow, I've actually got so many more ideas I can incorporate here, I might actually write a follow-up, then you can leave some things a little bit open, just to leave that door open. But I think in terms of wow endings, you're looking for action or drama, or some kind of scene which kind of really captivates the reader, where it feels like this is all come to a head. And remember, of course, on having a wow ending, to have that wow moment, we need to kind of lead up to that throughout the story. So we can't just have, you know, the kind of middle part of the story, if we're going to describe it that way. You need to build the tension. You kind of need to lead up to that. Think of it as kind of like a mountain, and we're kind of going up slowly up to the mountain. We're getting higher and higher. You know, we look down, it looks scary. We're getting higher and higher, and then we reach the top and we reach the peak, and that's where kind of everything comes together. That crescendo, that moment, that scene, which kind of brings it together, and the reader or the viewer is like, wow, you know, their hands are sweaty or their heart's racing. So I guess an answer to that question is, if we want the wow moment, we've got to kind of build up to it first. You know, we can't just have it in isolation, because there will be no wow. So we kind of build, and we do that through the characters, you know, through maybe tension in relationships between different characters, or between a subplot that is whirring along in the background. You know, whatever it may be, we need to lead up to that wow moment. I hope that answers your question, Rhiannon. Another question from Dakota. What are children most into? I assume that is the last word, into, interested in nowadays. So a great question. I would love to answer it, because if I knew that, then I may sell more books. No, I think, you know, children nowadays, from my, you know, before COVID-19, I visited several primary schools to talk in assemblies and run workshops with pupils about my books for World Book Day. And, you know, I always speak to young people through my day job as well. And what's surprising is that children, even primary school children, are so socially aware nowadays. You know, they have access to the news, to, you know, social media in some cases, and they're a lot more aware of social issues. And so, you know, both of my books, you know, in a very, very discreet and subtle way, do tackle some issues like homelessness, even domestic violence. There's a very discreet, subtle reference to that in a tiny, subtle way. But, you know, children are very socially aware. They're very clever, and very switched on. So I think, you know, just kind of providing the typical kind of beginning, middle, end, and the obvious ending isn't going to cut it anymore. In terms of what they're into, you know, if you look at children's books and the biggest children's book sellers, you know, obviously the Harry Potter series is still incredibly popular. David Walliams doesn't do too badly. But, you know, I guess it's, you know, I think for me, you know, I want to treat my readership like adults in a way, you know, because, you know, I don't want my books to speak to them like children. You know, they're young people with opinions and thoughts about the world around them. And so I hope by talking about some social issues, albeit in a very subtle way, you know, they can respond to that and think about that, and it can help them inform their own opinions. But I guess, you know, if you just go on Google, if you want to find particular topics or music they're into, I would not have a clue. I hope that answers your question, Dakota. Brilliant. Excellent. Let's have a look. Next question. Olivia, how do you balance detail and being concise to hold attention, especially for younger children? Excellent question. It's not easy. You know, if you read any kind of online forums that tell you how to write a children's book, when I first started kind of writing books, so to speak, even though I've always written kind of short stories and so forth, I did do some Google searches and looked at, you know, what are the things, children's books, what are those ingredients that you can include to kind of write books that are popular and that children enjoy. And a lot of them say don't give them too much detail. Children want to be able to use their imaginations. They don't need detail. They don't need too much description. Just focus on action and plot and characters to a certain extent. However, just going back to my previous answer, is I actually think having some element of detail and building that kind of visualization in the reader's minds for younger children as well is important. I guess if you're writing a book, just say 250, 300 pages, you don't want pages and pages of description. But at the same time, we can include occasional references to things like, physical attributes of characters or to the setting. We can kind of make references to what the environment looks like, or the weather, or certain aspects like that. But I guess we just want to occasionally do that and include them in there, rather than have big long paragraphs of description. We want it to be broken up with dialogue and action, and so the plot flows. It's true that I guess the younger you are, I've got 2 toddler children who are 3 and nearly 2, and their attention spans are very short, unless it's kind of Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol, which they currently love. So I guess the younger the child, or the younger the children, then the shorter the attention span. So I guess in the context of the videos which we're looking to create, we need to, again, I think there was a question earlier around how we distill a story into a short video. It needs to be kind of bang, bang, bang. Those 7 milestones condensed down with a tiny bit of context around that. I hope that answers your question, Olivia. If it doesn't, please come back to me. I'm going to have to wrap up in probably 5 or 10 minutes. So I hope that's okay, but I'm very happy to do another one of these. Let's try and get through more questions. Question from Gemma. My 10-year-old has written some of her book, and it is at 12,000 words now, but she has written it in first person. Would it be beneficial to go back through it and change it to third person? How many words would fill a book like your CEO size? Great question. So I would say don't change it. If that is your daughter's style, she's written it in first person, then I wouldn't change that. I would suggest that she keeps it as it is and kind of builds on that character voice, whichever character she's kind of telling that story through. In terms of word count, so this is about 38,000 words, which is 230 odd pages, and with a few illustrations dotted throughout. But I wouldn't worry about word length too much. I guess it's just about the structure of the story and making sure that the plot flows and keeps the reader engaged. It's quite easy to waffle if we want to just fill up words for the sake of it. So don't worry about the word count. And in my opinion, Gemma, I would not change it and go back and change it to third person. It would be a very laborious task. It would be quite heartbreaking in my view as well if I had to do that for a story that I'd written. It would be quite hard to do that, so I wouldn't change it, but that's just my opinion. Thank you, Gemma. Olga, thank you, Olga. Sorry I called you Anya earlier, but thank you very much, Olga, for your understanding. So would you say a story like Cinderella or like an alternative version of it would be good, or is it too mainstream? I mean, it's a great idea. The fairy tales, you can definitely bring those to life with a modern twist. So I actually think that's a really good idea. I mean, obviously, when we think about, the current situation now, whether there's some ideas there to play on that theme of lockdown and being with family, the rainbow theme as well, which everyone is kind of using as a symbol for our fantastic NHS and key workers and everything else. But I think to use an original kind of fairy tale classic and giving that a kind of 2020 twist would be pretty cool, actually. So, you know, I guess the positive is that there's a wealth of stories. There's so many great stories out there that have been written. I guess it's making sure that we have a few which kind of work together as a portfolio, but are equally distinct in their own way and are kind of different. So again, sorry if that was a waffly answer, but I think that's a really good idea. Excellent. Let's just flick down. Brilliant. Another question from Dakota. What's the best way to put comedy into a story? Is slapstick something that works? Great question. I think for this medium, you know, if we're thinking 2 to 4 minute video, and the audience is primary school, then, you know, slapstick could work. It just needs to be executed right, because it can, I guess slapstick is one of those forms of comedy which can either, you know, be really funny and really work, or it can fall a bit flat. So it's quite, I guess, quite a difficult thing to get right and hit it right on the nose. So but I definitely think comedy, you know, something fun, you know, whether it's laugh out loud funny or whether it's just something which makes people chuckle, is a different matter. But I think having some element of comedy in there, and humor is definitely a good idea. I guess, you know, we want the children who watch these videos to enjoy them, to have fun watching them. So, you know, but we're kind of retelling stories which they may already know about, but we're just retelling them in a different way. And through that, we want to entertain. And a great way to do that is to have some form of humor in there. So slapstick, it's a good idea. I think it just needs to be executed right. I hope that answers your question, Dakota. I think we seem to have run out of questions, which is good, I think. But like I said, you know, I'm very happy to, you know, have another one of these sessions, you know, whenever you want. To be honest, I'm not going anywhere. My social life is non-existent, like everyone right now. So I'm generally free in the evening. So very happy to do another one. And sorry, just reading another question from Olga. It would be helpful if we could repeat it to get more advice as we proceed. Brilliant. So yeah, we'll definitely do another one. I will liaise with Sarah, and thank you very much to Sarah for organising this and for getting in touch with me. You know, it's really appreciated. I've really enjoyed speaking to you all this evening. And so let's do another one whenever you want, and take care, stay safe, and good luck with the project. And we will speak very soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.